forestry investment management company. We manage forestry plantations in Latin America on behalf of investors worldwide. Today I'm going to give you a presentation about the forestry industry itself, the forestry as an asset class, and how can you invest in forests through ecoforests. Before I start, let's just reflect for a minute on what has happened in the financial markets in the last 2 weeks. The level of volatility that we're experiencing in the financial markets sometimes makes us think that instead of chasing a return in the financial markets, we should concentrate in building our wealth, in containing our wealth, and mitigating risk. And doing so, sometimes staying outside of the markets or diversifying outside of the markets gives us the opportunity to be able to maintain our wealth outside of the markets. So before I go with the presentation, there's a short video introduction. It's supposed to be playing.
Historically, the most important source for tropical hardwood has been the indiscriminate and often illegal destruction of aboriginal rainforests. Sadly, this has often been accompanied by the exploitation of native peoples and the extinction of many animal and plant species. In the past, this precious tropical timber has been greedily cut down without regard for the consequences. Thankfully, the world is starting to wake up. These destructive practices are no longer acceptable. Public pressure has forced governments and politicians to adopt social and environmental policies that reflect current public opinion. But even so, consumption increases, demand increases, and standards of living improve. As population increases, intense pressure is being placed on our planet's ability to meet the demand for a whole range of commodities and products. The demand for tropical wood and tropical wood products is growing steadily. Prices have been rising for decades. As traditional sources disappear and demand increases, it has become obvious that alternate sources must be found. In recent years, tropical hardwood plantations have increasingly become this alternate source. Positive environmental impact, positive social contribution, highest possible timber quality and yield, highest possible value and return on investment.
So many of you might have heard that money doesn't grow on trees, but actually it does. So we're just going to go over and discuss why there is so much value in the forestry industry. Just a brief introduction of the forestry industry and then forestry as an asset class. One of the basic points of considering the value of timber is what you can see in this graph. If you look from 1960 and looking up to 2048, the demand of timber in this planet is almost parallel to population growth. Statistics show that for the next 20 years, there will be another 2 billion more people in this planet. Where is the timber that these people need going to come from? Because if we look historically up to 1960, the demand of timber and population growth is almost parallel. However, to this date, we have about 21% of the natural forest remain intact. Everything else has been harvested because we as humans, every day we use a product from the forest. From this table that's here, to the chair that you use, to a piece of paper, to the frame of your house. Everybody needs a product of the forest. Now, if we consider that there will be 2 billion more people in the next 20 years coming to this planet, where will the future resources of timber come from? So just as a fact, about 13 million hectares of forest is deforested on a yearly basis on this planet. Since year 2000 to 2012, over 230 million hectares of timber has been deforested. Now, in consideration, forest plantations like ecoforests, we basically were cultivating timber for the future supply of timber to this planet. And it only accounts to about less than 5% of the current availability of forest is actually forest plantations. What a forest plantation comprises of for production of timber, it starts with the first thing, which is managing our nurseries and seedlings. We obtain the best quality seeds to grow the nursery in our plantations. We select the most appropriate land in Latin America. We mechanize the soil. We add nutrients to the soil to assure a proper production of the timber. Looking at timber as a financial asset class, this is an article that was publicized in The Economist in May of this year. And their analysis on the production of timber is showing that investors that have invested in timber in the last 10 years, they have generated between 18 to 21%. That is basically just on versus demand and supply. The demand of timber versus the supply of timber. We're looking at markets like China and India, that they are growing exponentially, and they don't have the sufficient supply of timber. So they're looking for other resources, and this just shows the returns and the value that you're obtaining in timber. Now, looking at the asset class, timberland as an asset class is a relatively new asset class. It's been considered an investment asset class considering back to 1980. But if we look at the amount of investment coming into the forestry industry, between 1989 and this year, there has been an increase from $1 billion to up to $125 billion being invested in the forestry industry. Now, there's a reason behind it. There's organizations like the Harvard Endowment Fund, like Mercer Investments, organizations like Yale University, that they're focusing on investing in timber, because there's a clear understanding that there will be a need for timber in the future. There's a need for timber today already. If we look at prices of timber, they're increasing from 10 to 14% on a yearly basis. Just to considering the value of that, looking at it as an asset class, if you compare timber to other equities, real estate, or small cap, the returns on timber has been historically for the last 30 years about 14%. Now this year shows the returns on timber based on different regions in the world where you can invest in timber. This calculation is based on a study from AIMCO, which is an investment company from Canada that's invested over $450 million in timber. And if you were to invest timber, let's say in USA or Canada, which I have most of the production is for pulp and paper, so timber for the use of paper, you can make a return of about 6 to 8%. If you make an investment in timber in Central America and South America, that's where EcoForest is doing their business, 13 to 19% is the real return that you can expect. Why is it a real return? Because timber is also a commodity, so there's also an inflation hedge. So if prices of commodities, if there's inflation, prices of commodities go up, prices of timber go up. So there's always an inflation hedge when you invest in timber, and that gives you a real advantage. Another important factor is that it's invariably positive. It's a biological hedge. The tree grows, as I say, as long as the sun shines and the rain falls, the trees continue to grow. So does the investment. Now, as I said, right now we're entering into high inflationary periods. It's being considered at this time that there's high inflationary periods. And in terms of low, moderate, or high inflationary periods, as we are right now, timber always has greater returns than the other equities or domestic equities. The reason being because it has an inflation hedge. Now, how are returns generated on timber? The most important factor on the returns on timber are biological growth. So if you invest in timber, you make an investment in timber, you're expecting 14% return. 60% of the return that will be generated on the investment that you're expecting, it's purely by the natural growth of the tree. So as long as the tree is growing, the investment is growing in value, and this is a standard in forestry. The trees will grow every year, and that grows the value of it. And that's 60% of your return. The other 30% of the return is based on the market price increase. For the last 45 years, we're talking about eucalyptus, if we're talking about pine, if we're talking about oak, most of these types of timber, they have been rising between 7 to 9% every year in price. So if you bought a mahogany table last year and you're buying it 2 years from now, usually the price will perhaps be about 15 to 20% greater. But the most important factor to consider is that 60% of the return that you can generate in timber is based on the biological growth of the tree. It's not affected by the markets. Trees don't read the newspaper, so they keep on growing.
Who can measure this?
Sorry?
Who can measure this growth?
Well, the growth happens on a year on year on. So, for example, with EcoForest, we manage eucalyptus, we manage mahogany, we manage teak. So you can have a project grow for 30 years. The more it grows, the more value you have. And this is one of the advantages with timber. Let's say if it was 2008, and that's the time when you want to cut your trees and sell them, maybe it was not the best time to harvest because there was a financial market collapse. So you keep your investment for 2 more years. And what happens in 2 more years? Your trees grew 2 more years, so they gain more value. But the 60% is based in, it's a natural benefit of timber, and that's what gives you the security. So 60% of the return that you should be expecting, it's natural. It's from the tree growing itself. The calculation depends on the species that you invest. So teak is different than oak or eucalyptus. Now, considering the risk factors in investing with timber, we can consider first the physical, physical factors of risk. If the tree dies, if there's an insect, if there's a forest fire, if there's a flood, with EcoForest, our projects are insured. We have an insurance policies that are applied. We work in countries that have, for example, in Costa Rica, is through the Instituto Nacional de Seguros, which is an insurance that is guaranteed by the state of Costa Rica. So the first factor you would think, if I'm investing in forestry and there's an earthquake, there's a volcano, there's a flood, well, our projects maintain an insurance that will protect you from that. And you consider the political risk. There's a perception that in Latin America there is a lot of political risk. I mean, we don't invest in Venezuela, we don't invest in Colombia or Bolivia, but if you look at countries like Costa Rica, Panama, Uruguay, they're very stable politically. Actually, the Oxford political risk map shows that the risk that you look into these countries is very, very moderate. Now, from the regulatory perspective, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, this type of organizations, the United Nations, they're trying to bring investment to Latin America. And for that reason, they implement a very strict regulatory periods to assure that foreign investment coming into these countries is well protected. For example, if you think of a company like Chiquita Banana, you know, Chiquitas you see in the grocery store, the banana company, or Dole. Or Dole. So anyway, these companies invest in Costa Rica, they invest in Panama for pineapples, for bananas, and they come and they invest $100 million. So you will ask yourself, how can they go and invest in Latin America? How are they protected? And the reason they're protected is because there is an agriculture forestry law that protects foreign investments in these countries. And this is a law that was implemented first in Chile, then it was introduced in Argentina, Uruguay, but it's the same format of the law that is supported by the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank to assure that foreign investment is well protected in these regions. Now, the last factor that we can consider is liquidity. And liquidity in forestry investments obviously is not a stock, it's not a bond, it's not as liquid as the stock market. The consideration of investing in forestry is actually wealth preservation. You're investing for a longer period in time. However, with EcoForests, we've been managing projects in Latin America for over 20 years now, and we have developed what we call a secondary market, because at the same time we have investors that have participated in our project. Our investment cycles can range from 8 years up to 20 years. If an investor has participated with us and sometime down the road they are considering to liquidate their investment, we have also clients that are interested to invest in a much shorter period of time, so we develop a secondary market to allow liquidity for existing investors as well. In principle, within a 6 to 8 month period, we can offer a liquidity factor to investors that participate in our project. Now, this is a study that was done by Hancock Timber Research Group. It's one of the leading forest managers in the United States. They manage about $60 billion of forests. And what it shows here is that from any storm damage, fire damage, or insect disease that there is in a managed plantation, it's less than 0.09% that ever gets affected. So that shows that because people have a lot of perception that what if there's a pest, what if there's a flood, what if there's a storm damage. But when you are working on a very well managed project, usually chances of anything like this happening to a project are very, very minimal. Another important factor of investing, obviously, in forestry is to consider the social impact that this investment provides. Well, investing in forestry, we get very involved with the communities, and we provide assistance in the regions that we're investing, and that is obviously a factor that it's very important nowadays. Why invest in Latin America? Investing in Latin America, this is just a study of the precipitation. Brazil or in Central America, it's just basically simple as rain. If you plant a tree in Canada, or you plant it in England, or you plant it in Costa Rica, it will grow in those regions 20 to 30 times faster because of the precipitation and the climate. And that is the reason why we are investing in Latin America. We're investing in tropical timber in Latin America, and it's just, in principle, is the growth time. If I plant a tree in Canada at the same time that in Brazil, then the investment will take 70 years. It wouldn't be appealing to anyone.
What about Africa?
Africa has similar tropical weather as well, but they don't have the legislation that protects the foreign investor. So you invest in Kenya, you can probably get the same climate, but you don't get the security that Latin America offers to investors. Now, EcoForests. EcoForests, we're a forestry boutique investment company. We've been managing forestry projects in Latin America for over 20 years. We manage plantations of teak, mahogany, and eucalyptus. Teak is known, the king of woods, is one of the strongest type of timber that you can find in the market. Main uses for teak is in the boating industry. So in the boat, yacht industry, some of our early harvest of teak we sell to a company called Fincantieri. They're the ones that build the Princess Cruise Line. And for them to build one of these cruise liners, they use about 10 kilometers of square cubic meters of teak just for the railing on each floor, without considering the flooring around the pool area, let's say, for example. And teak is used mainly in the boating industry. Most of the natural plantations of teak come from Southeast Asia. Burma, Myanmar is where it originally came from. Most of these places, they have depleted their plantations of teak. And the future sources are now coming from places like Costa Rica or Panama or Ecuador. The investment cycle with teak is 16 years. Mahogany is a high-class timber used mainly for furniture. The cycle of investment with mahogany is 20 years. And finally, eucalyptus is a semi-hardwood. There's a very strong demand right now in India and China. Eucalyptus was used for pulp and paper and for very minor things in North America and Europe, in door frames, tables, house frames out of eucalyptus that it was never used for that, but it's now a resource very valuable in that region. Now our plantations are in Costa Rica, Argentina, Honduras, and Panama. The returns that you can expect on our investments range from 10 to 14%. We have various investment vehicles that can suit family offices, private individuals, or institutions. Some of the institutions or organizations that have endorsed us are the Clinton Foundation, the Cornell School of Forestry from the University of Georgia, Bayer Crop Science, and McKinsey & Company. And I'll just give you a little bit of detail in terms of the investment. We have two different investment formats in our project. We have the Tree Partner Program. That's when an investor decides to participate directly into one of our existing plantations. As I said, we have plantations, eucalyptus in Argentina, teak in Costa Rica, and mahogany in Honduras. In that case, the investor will purchase, with a minimum of 25 to 40,000 euro, you purchase a hectare or half a hectare of timber. That includes the management, the insurance, over the cycle of the investment. Now, as I said, teak, for example, it's a 16-year investment. It doesn't mean that you invest today, you will not see a return in 16 years. The cycle or the process of investment will bring you dividends throughout the 16 years. So investing in teak, you will see a return after the 7th year, after the 11th year, and on the 16th year. With mahogany, you see a return on the 11th year, and then a return on the 20th year. And with eucalyptus, you see a return at the end of the 8th year, which is when there is the final harvest. On the other side, we have Investment Direct, this is a project that we do as an independent project, and that is for a family office or a high net worth individual interested in having direct ownership of the entire project. And in that case, with a minimum of 700,000 euro, you have an ownership of an entire plantation. You take ownership of the land, you take ownership of the trees, and we take a mandate to manage the project on your behalf. We are a vertically integrated company, so we have our nursery, we have our plantation management, we have our harvest management, and we also have our sawmills and export department. So it's a turnkey project. When you invest with the company, we process everything up to harvesting and exporting of the timber. Does anybody have any questions? If anybody would like to ask any questions, also Michael Shmulevitz, who is my representative in Israel, would like to a few words.
אני רוצה לגעת בקצרה בשתי נקודות. האחת זה נושא של אקוטריק. עכשיו, החברה מאוד גאה בבטאים שלה ובפעילות, והיא גם מזמינה את המשקיעים לבוא ולראות. עכשיו, ההזמנה הזאת היא לא מס שפתיים. מי שפונה בסדר גודל מסוים של 25,000 יורו, אז הוא מקבל את האקוטריק, שזה למעשה כרטיס לשבוע על חשבון החברה, כולל אירוח על מנת לראות את המטעים. והרציונל הוא די פשוט, כי אנשים בקוסטה ריקה, האנשים שמגיעים למטעים, מבקרים אותם, רואים את החברה בפעילות שלה, מתרשמים לטובה, בדרך כלל מגדילים את השקעתם, וגם מהווים שגריר מאוד טוב של החברה לחברים, משפחה ומכרים. אני עצמי הייתי במרץ השנה בקוסטה ריקה עם עוד קבוצה של משקיעים מהארץ, וזה אגב מה שקרה. אנשים התרשמו לטובה, הגדילו את ההשקעה. עכשיו, נסעתי לשם לא בגלל שאני נציג של החברה, אלא מכיוון שאני משקיע. כלומר, אני השקעתי מכספי וקניתי, מכיוון שאני מאמין במוצר. עכשיו, למה אני חושב שזה חשוב? יש שתי סיבות. א', הרציונל הכלכלי הוא מאוד ברור, ויש אין ספור מאמרים, מחקרים, ומאמר מאוד מעניין ב-Financial Times, buy forest, wood is good for you. אני יכול לשלוח את המראה מקום. והדבר הנוסף, אני חושב שההשקעה הזאת היא מאוד חשובה, זה מסוג ההשקעות שכל אחד צריך לעשות לפי יכולתו. שנת 2015 זאת הייתה השנה הכי חמה מאז שהתחילו מדידות של אקלים. ב-1880. ואחת הסיבות זה הכריתה של העצים. ואם יש דבר שאנחנו יכולים לתרום ולסייע לאיכות הסביבה, לשיפור מאזן האקולוגי, זה הדבר הזה. אז אם כל אחד באחוזים מסוימים מכספו ישקיע בתחום הזה, כמו שאתם רואים, כלכלית הוא לא יצא נפסד. ומבחינת התרומה, אני חושב שזה מאוד מאוד חשוב. וכמו שגם באפט אמר בזמנו, שאנחנו יושבים כרגע בצל של עץ שמישהו אחר נטע לפנינו. וההשקעה הזאת היא השקעה שהיא במובן המובהק ביותר, social responsible, ethical, ומסוג הדברים שכל אחד מאיתנו חייב לעשות. תודה. בבקשה.
אתה פה לא נותן איזה סוג פרטים.
יש שם כרטיסי ביקור, ואני אשמח לענות לכל שאלה וכל
כשאתה משקיע, אתה משקיע בחלקה ספציפית, או שאתה משקיע בחברה שהיא מנהלת?
בחלקה, כל הרעיון.
זאת אומרת שאם החלקה יש פתאום בעיה של גידולים, של מזיקים, של פנימות, או כל מיני דברים כאלו, הלכה החלקה. זאת אומרת, אם אני משקיע בחברה שמשקיעה בהמון, אני אתן לך דוגמה, פה בארץ יש מכה עכשיו של הברושים. אז הם מתחילים ליפול לברושים.
יש לי דוגמה יותר טובה.
לא, ברושים יש.
יש לי דוגמה יותר טובה. במטעים שלהם, למשל, בנקודה מסוימת, היה מצע סלעי, דבר שלא יכולו לדעת מקודם. והעצים שהיו באותו מצע סלעי, באותו אזור סלעי, לא גדלו טוב כמו עצים שהיו אמורים לגדול. עכשיו, כל החברה עושה מה שנקרא mirror plantation. זאת אומרת, היא נוטעת בעודף. ואז זה מאפשר לה, מספיק תמרון, במקרה ויש איזו חלקה שהיא פחות מוצלחת, לתת בדיוק את אותו גודל של עצים מוצלחים למשקיע. עכשיו, הדברים האלה מטופלים. כן, בבקשה.
התשואה מתקבלת שכורתים את העצים ומשתמשים בהם.
התשואה מתקבלת...
זה שמסתכלים עליהם...
ודאי. עכשיו, התשואה מתקבלת בשני אופנים. אופן אחד זה הדילול, מה שנקרא פינים. באיזשהו שלב, בחיי המצע, כל הזמן מדללים ומוצאים את העצים הפחות מוצלחים. כי המטרה היא לגדל עצים יפים, ישרים וגבוהים. עכשיו, בשנה הראשונה או השנייה שאתה מוציא, אין לעץ שווי כלכלי. אבל בשנה השביעית, כשאתה מוציא עץ לדילול, על מנת שאחרים יגדלו טוב יותר, אז יש כבר שווי כלכלי. ולכן תשואות מתקבלות בשנה שביעית כתוצאה מדילול, בשנה 11 גם כתוצאה מדילול, ובסוף בשנה 16 הכריתה הסופית. ואז זה עיקר התשואה בחלק הארי.
אני שואל שאלה. אתה משקיע כסף בצד השני של העולם, אתה בעצם נתון בידיים של מישהו, לא אומר חלילה שהם לא בסדר, אבל אתה בעצם אומרים לך, הצליח, לא הצליח, מכרנו ככה, מכרנו אחרת, אתה הרי לא מטפל בזה שום דבר באופן אישי. לא במזיקים ולא בקריטה ולא בכלום. איך יש לך איזושהי בקרה לדבר הזה? איך אתה יכול לדעת? מקודם דיברו על קרנות נאמנות, יש חקיקה וכולי. שקיפות, איך פה אני מנהל את זה בעצם?
כמות משקעים יכולה להשתנות גם כן, גל הזרם הגולף שמדברים על...
זה כבר שנה גדול, זאת אומרת, יש שם פשוט.
לא, זרם הגולף מתחיל להשתנות, זה בעיה בעולם.
The calculations based on growth this is based on analysis of each species. So for example, teak, you can assume how much the tree will grow every year. In the process of forestry, for us to achieve what we're expecting to achieve, we're looking at the best quality out of what we planted. So in each hectare we plant over 1,000 trees. And at the end of the cycle, when we harvest, we only want 25% of those 1,000 originally planted. So that means that I'm doing a pre-selection I'm calling 75% only to keep the best 25%. And the return that we calculate and you can see, we can send you a graph that you can see how the calculation is made, is based on only 25% of the plantation remaining at the end of the cycle. So if I were to say there's 100 trees, pick the best 25. And the best 25 is the only thing we need to give you the return we're expecting to give you. So when you have a good pre-selection, that's how you can assure the good quality. So we're getting the best 25 trees out of 100. And that's how you bring the best quality.